minutes, just to let people trickle in. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, we actually have a meeting later, but it's good to see you here.
Yeah, I said it, but I'm not going to miss this.
Nice.
GM everyone, for people who are joining, we're just going to give a couple more minutes for other people to join.
Cool.
All right, maybe one more minute and then we'll get started, or maybe 30 seconds, we'll get started.
Sounds good.
Are you going to be sharing your screen at all, Sean?
Yeah, yeah, I will be.
All right, well, welcome everyone. We'll just get started here. Welcome to another Matchbox Workshop, where we bring on a guest to talk about their project related to StarkNet's gaming ecosystem. And if you're wondering what Matchbox is an ecosystem of developers, designers, writers, investors, and educators. And our goal is to bring on-chain gaming to the next level on StarkNet. This means we contribute by building the infrastructure, which includes things like building the games and tools for on-chain gaming. We mentor the devs who are building these primitives. We also provide the resources in the form of grants and support building out this infrastructure. And we also think that it's equally important to educate people who are already in the community and anyone else interested who's not in the community about all the cool people and projects within the growing StarkNet gaming ecosystem. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think we're all generally really excited about all the great people and their ideas. So today we're hosting a workshop with 0xsean, who is building a StarkNet native marketplace called Oasis. And for this workshop, he will introduce us to starknet.js, which is a JavaScript library for StarkNet. So without further ado, Sean, if you're ready, feel free to just take the stage, give us an intro, and jump right into the presentation.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much. Just gonna present my screen. Can everyone see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you very much, Magic, for the great introduction, and thanks, Matchbox, for giving this opportunity to present starknet.js. So today, my name is Sean, and I'm going to be presenting starknet.js and sort of a very introductory way of using starknet.js inside your application. And thank you very much to Arjun, Charlefs, JSY, and of course Starkware for collaborating with me on starknet.js. So sort of a little bit of background of how I got involved in StarkNet. So I was sort of looking for a long-term scaling solution for Ethereum. It's pretty obvious like Ethereum has a scaling issue because when you do a swap on Uniswap or when you try to trade NFTs, the gas fees could be over $50, and that sort of prices a lot of average consumers out of the market. So I started looking for a more long-term scaling solution, um, and that's how I stumbled across CK rollups, because CK rollups sort of provide the lowest gas fees out of side chains with optimistic and optimistic rollups. CK rollups has the lowest gas fees and also the fastest settlement between layer 2 to layer 1. So given those factors, I think CK rollups has the biggest scaling potential out of the three scaling, like primary scaling solutions on Ethereum. And then when I joined the ecosystem, there was probably like 5 developers back in September of 2021. And I sort of wanted to see what I can build on top of this scaled Ethereum sort of experience. But I quickly found out there was a lack of tooling in the ecosystem. Like there wasn't even a clear way of how my application can even talk to Starknet. In Ethereum, you have libraries such as like ethers.js and web3.js. Those libraries allow any customer-facing application to actually interface with the Ethereum network, and there was nothing equivalent in Starknet. So, as a front-end engineer at that time, I thought I could really help the ecosystem by building this library, and that's how I started building on starknet.js. So what is starknet.js? Starknet.js allows JavaScript applications like web and mobile apps to interface with a Starknet network. So you could do things like, like read from the Starknet blockchain, write to the Starknet blockchain, and mainly do different kinds of operations that let you, read and manipulate the blockchain itself. And we sort of took a lot of inspiration from ethers.js. We think that they provide the proper abstractions for what is needed for applications. And these APIs sort of are around provider, account, signer, and contract, very similar to ethers.js. So sort of I'll give a brief description of the different APIs for starknet.js, and we'll go into an example later. So the provider is sort of the primary way to interface with the starknet.js, not necessarily with signing transactions. And these are typically when you're trying to read from the blockchain, right? Because if you do want to write to the blockchain, you typically need to sign a transaction or a message. So the provider sort of gives you the base APIs to read from the blockchain, read from the Starknet blockchain. And if you want to write to the blockchain, you need to go through the account API. In Starknet, sort of every time you want to change the state of the Starknet blockchain, you have to go through a account contract, and sort of the account API allows you to sign transactions, sign messages to, authenticate that the actual account wanted to manipulate some sort of state on the Starknet blockchain. And an account sort of um, implements a custom signer, so you can have different ways of signing a transaction, which I will talk more about in the next slide, and sort of why it's necessary. So, like if you can imagine, like Argent, Argent X is a Chrome extension that signs transaction and messages for you, and we sort of they implement their own signer API. But for example, if you have a hardware wallet like Ledger, they're also exploring supporting Starknet in their hardware wallet. They sign messages a little bit differently. So they sign messages in their hardware wallet, and that's why they need to implement their own signer API. And that's why the signer API is sort of its own abstraction, because different wallets might want to sign differently depending if you're a Chrome extension or a hardware wallet. And the last API is the contract API. So the contract API sort of takes a contract API and allows you to invoke, you know, different functions on the contract on starknet. So when you deploy a contract onto starknet, you can use the contract API to call different functions, whether it's to read from that contract or write to that contract. And then next, I'll sort of give a example of all of these APIs together. Yeah. So here is some sample code that's actually on my GitHub. Yeah, I forgot to mention, I actually gave this workshop for the Encode hackathon. So maybe after this, we'll post a link to the GitHub that will have this code available for you to try out. Yeah, so first you need to like compile. Okay, so first like this demo sort of goes through like deploying a account contract and then deploying an ERC20 contract, and then makes you can make an account that can transact a ERC20 token between. You can mint a ERC20 token to that account that you just deployed. Yeah, and I guess it's good to mention, like in Starknet, all accounts are a contract on the network. Versus in Ethereum, you have like private and public key. In Starknet, you have that as well, but then you also have a account contract on the blockchain that every sort of transaction has to go through before reaching the final contract. So this is sort of an example of, you know, creating an account and then minting some tokens to that account. So first we sort of need to generate the key pair, the public and private key, and then we'll deploy a account contract onto Starknet. So we sort of use the provider to deploy a contract. And then, yeah, so now we're calling the contract API using the account contract that we just deployed onto Starknet. And then we're going to initialize that account by calling the initialize function that was provided on the new contract. And then the next thing is we want to deploy a ERC20 contract. So we call the provider and we deploy a ERC20 contract. And then we wait for it, and then we create a contract based on the ERC20 contract that we just deployed. And then the next is, so we created the ERC20 with the contract API, right? And then we call the ERC20, and then we call the mint function that's available in the contract API. And then we mint 1,000 tokens to the account contract that we deployed previously. And then we can check the balance of that account, and then we should have 1,000, right? Because we minted 1,000 tokens to that contract over here. And then, yeah, and then now we want to transfer some tokens from that account back to that contract, right? And then we need to sort of have a nonce, because every time you sign a new transaction, you need to increase the nonce, so then you know that this is a new and unique transaction. Yeah, so we get the nonce, and then we call the execute function on the account contract, and then we provide the signature that allows you to transfer 10 tokens back to the ERC20 token. And then you can call the balance function again on the ERC20 contract, and you should see 990, right? Because we just transferred 10 tokens here. And then that's sort of a very simple demo of creating an account contract, creating a ERC20 contract, minting some tokens onto that account contract we created, and then transferring some tokens back to the ERC20 contract. So that sort of showcases a sort of basic usage of all of these different APIs.
Super cool. Super cool, Sean. Dirk has a question in chat.
Okay.
He's saying, I noticed 1,000 is in a string. How do the big numbers and units work in comparison to equals? And if
Yeah,
you have a question, feel free to leave it in chat, and we'll also take questions at the end.
yeah. So I think right now in Starknet, everything is in um, it's in Fels, right? Which is a sort of a really big number. So what starknet.js does is it does a lot of the type transformations for you. So it transforms a lot of these felts to like human readable strings, and that's why a lot of times you can just call these numbers, and then sort of behind the scene we sort of do the transformation for you. But there are some times that you sort of need to call the transformation yourself to convert it to a human readable string.
Right, that makes sense. I was just more curious, like how the fixed point system would work with like tokens. But
Fixed point system with
you know how like in maybe I'm doing this incorrectly, but like basically like tokens on in like the ETH mainnet or something, they have like quote unquote like 18 decimal places, right?
right, right.
So because it's like a way, it's like but it's like a fixed point system. I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. So I'm just trying to understand like what the parallel is there. Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So I think different tokens use different units, right? I believe. And then
Yeah.
for us, we're just using the test tokens at the moment. But I would imagine if we support more tokens, we would have to, like you said, have custom units for that specific token. Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that yet, but I know like right now since Starknet is mostly on testnet, we're sort of testing everything in test tokens. But I think as we see more tokens, we'll support those sort of tokens um, down the line.
Yeah, so like if you wanted to like for example, if you wanted to like transfer like half a token, that like with that wouldn't work, right? If you put in 0.5 as a string, because like a felt is a signed integer, right? Or
Yeah, I don't.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think it would work. Yeah, um, yeah. Because I remember with Oasis as well, like even though when you put in 10 test tokens, behind the scene, it's actually like a lot of zeros, right? And then that's sort of how you can manage.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, no, that's kind of where I was going, right? Like that actually does make sense. So it's
yeah,
like 10e. It actually is like 10e18 or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. So it's like
Yeah. Okay,
like
okay.
a lot of ethers, right? It's like
I got it.
Bitcoin and Satoshi as well, Satoshis as well. Yeah. Yeah, so I'll just briefly go over this slide. So I guess like right now the new API is released like with all these three. And then we also have a new documentation that we're working in progress called starknetjs.com. If you guys want to contribute, and then this sort of goes through an idea and also has the has like how to deploy a account contract, ERC20 contract, and use it in your React apps. And then, yeah, special thanks to everyone that collaborated on this library, especially Yanek from Argent, Milan from Shard Labs, Drew from Jedi Swap, and other open source contributors. Um, and I'll take questions if you guys have any. Or you can ask me anything about Starknet or yeah, whatever questions you guys have.
All right, cool. Thank you.
I think
If no one
Wayne,
has any question, ooh, looks like Green.
yeah, I think Wayne has something.
Go ahead, Yoni.
Yeah, can you pass strings? Um, I think in the contract API you could pass strings, and then we sort of do the conversion behind the scenes. Yeah.
So is there an issue importing the JSON file as a normal require, like a normal ES6 module? Is there an issue while passing that file? Because when I try to use it earlier, so what happened was if I don't use the file system, I'll get some error. So is
Yeah,
there any, so why are you guys using a special JSON pass file?
yeah. I think we have an issue for that on GitHub that requires. I believe it's because on Starcore's side there's some dependency that they're working on that doesn't allow us to pass it in directly, and that's why we're using like we're reading from a file system. And it's one of the pinned issues on our repo. So I think there's more details there. But like you said, like a lot
Thank,
of people ask the same question.
okay, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Any more? Anyone have any more questions? We have a lot of time still. We have about 38 minutes. If no one does, that's perfectly cool. Thanks, Sean. Thank you, everyone who's come and joined us this morning. Um, we look forward to the other workshops that we'll be hosting. Stay tuned in the Matchbox DAO Discord channel, and we'll see everyone around. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. All right, see you guys. Bye.
Thank you, Sean. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.